Oh hey gamers, it's me, Austin. It's been 6 years since the Switch came out, and I can't do this anymore! Luckily for you guys, with my ultimate hacking skills, I think I was able to get some insider info on the next Nintendo console. Now I haven't looked at it yet, don't you worry, because I want to predict what it could be. And to do that, we have to look back at Nintendo's history of hardware releases to properly theorize what the next console could be. And it all starts with the NES, Nintendo's first real attempt at making video game hardware. Yeah, there was the Game & Watch, which did pave the way for the Game Boy a decade later and their arcade systems, but they can't play Fortnite, can they? The NES was seriously amazing for the time. I mean, it saved the video game industry from nuclear Armageddon. Now, there's not much to compare this to, since this was the first hardware release from Nintendo, you idiot. And if you're as lonely as me, you already know everything you need to know about the NES. It was a great system. Nintendo had begun their biggest franchises. The graphics were pretty damn good for the time, while leaving plenty of room for improvement. And oh yeah, they also made a goddamn glove. Overall, this was a great start to Nintendo's hardware releases, but it wouldn't feel super cool until the SNES. Compared to the NES, this had so much going for it. 2 times the bits and 2 times the social isolation. So what changed? Well, the graphical capabilities were the main change here, with the SNES being able to display up to 256 colors at a time, while the NES could only display 13 for the sprites and 13 for the backgrounds. Absolutely pathetic. If I can't play Google Maps, what am I supposed to do for fun? This was pretty much the major change, just better graphics. That's it. Oh, Nintendo was also following up to some of their newest franchises and creating even more amazing experiences. Now, this release is something special. I mean, gaming consoles were still a relatively new thing, and so the SNES was an odd concept. Why would I buy another Nintendo console if they both play games and I own the first one? Why would I flush if I'm just gonna go again? But regardless of this pushback, the SNES still went on to sell pretty well. But before we move on, Nintendo had begun their handheld journey. Now, handheld gaming was already a thing, but Nintendo shattered the economy with the Nintendo Game Boy. Low quality, but also low price. This thing was amazing, beginning Nintendo's true start into the world of handhelds that we wouldn't see the end of. The graphics were lower quality, and this would be a mainstay of Nintendo's handhelds until we get to the current generation, but the main advantage was having quality video games on a portable device, so you could still go outside and find no true meaning in life. Also, it's the first handheld, so I can't compare it to anything yet. So then Nintendo skipped 61 consoles to get to the N64. Sales were not too hot. The N64, the next big leap for Nintendo. Like with the NES, this was focused on just making the graphics gooder, but that was most gaming consoles at this point in time as we figured out the wacky, weird World Wide Web of gaming. Not much to say here. I mean, upgrades to the hardware were pretty much a consistent line of graphics going up, but as far as handhelds go, the Game Boy was just going crazy. After the initial release of the Game Boy, several iterations followed leading into the early 2000s. That's an understatement. I've mentioned it like 10 times already, but basically, lighter and thinner, backlit, color screen, wide, flip and backlit. Now, Nintendo wouldn't go this hard ever again, but it still paved the way for those small, iterative upgrades that we have to this day. And while we're in the 2000s, did you know that Nintendo made a Square? I love this thing so much. This console deserves an entire video dedicated to it at some point, but for now, I want to focus specifically on what it did differently from its predecessor. Nothing! Okay, yeah, it had some of the best games of every Nintendo franchise imaginable, and the controller was amazing, but it really didn't do too much to change from the N64. I mean, of course, graphics kept getting better, which meant this thing doubles as a portable campfire, but as far as what changed, that's about it. The GameCube didn't really end up selling very well, despite the fact that it's a cool-ass square. Since the NES, each console had been declining in sales, because the only thing that changed was the graphical upgrades. Nothing else really pulled people in. But that would all change with the Nintendo Wii. Huh, just like that, huh? The Nintendo Wii launched in 2006, the next big console from Nintendo, completely changing up the game. Instead of having to use a controller with stupid buttons, now you can practice Pilates. Ooh. This was quite literally a game changer. It appealed to so many people, like tax-evading babies and wealth-hoarding boomers. This meant that the Wii became the best-selling Nintendo home console at the time, and it revitalized a company that was starting to worry about its decline. Games were built around this motion control aspect, and it helped to create so many unique and fun experiences that we all remember today. Nintendo focused on changing the game and making this something unique, not just like any other gaming console, and this would solidify the company as one to take risks and experiment a little bit. Also, Xbox and PlayStation would end up copying Nintendo because this worked so well, but they'll never be you, Reggie. It's also important to remember that the Wii kinda held back on the graphics aspect. Sure, the GPU was technically faster and so it could run more advanced effects, but generally this console stayed at 480p, while the competitors pushed to a 720p and even 1080p future. This set the stage for Nintendo. They took the risk of experimentation at the expense of graphical superiority. Now, I can't read, but I'm pretty sure that says at least 4, so looks like Nintendo's idea paid off. Nintendo really stuck to the idea of experimentation for their consoles going forward. But what about the handhelds? The DS, short for Donkey Spank, was the latest upgrade to the previous Game Boy lineup, featuring 2 times the amount of screen and epic 3D graphics. This was the portable to rule all portables. Sony's PS Poopy ain't got nothing on this. The DS was insane, quickly becoming the #1 system, both handheld and portable, in Nintendo's history, even to this day. Yeah, it wasn't anything crazy, but the form factor, the amazing games, and incredible portability of high-quality games sold this system to the moon. I'm so proud of this multi-billion-dollar company. So let's recap what Nintendo has done so far with their systems, because it's about to get weird. The consoles were just graphical upgrades each iteration, and not much was changing until the Wii, where they really experimented with the gameplay while stalling the graphical capabilities. The handhelds had a bunch of iterative upgrades, and honestly, it feels like the DS is just another iteration of the Game Boy, since the Game Boy Advance SP pretty much just feels like a beta version of the DS. There was also the DSi lineup of handhelds, with the major difference being a more polished OS, which paved the way for what we currently have on the Switch, and it proved that handhelds do not have to be just for games. But generally, while the Wii was an experimental console, we wouldn't see an experimental handheld until the 3DS. The 3DS was a different kind of upgrade. Yeah, sure, the graphics definitely got polished up a bit, and it had a lot more of a purpose with the OS, but the 3D screen was the first sort of random experimentation with the handhelds. Though this could just mostly be because what else were they supposed to do? By this time, the handhelds were pretty much as good as they could get, so Nintendo got bored. The 3D screen was honestly just more of a gimmick. I can't really think of this being a huge game changer, just more of a thing for you to say, huh, that's cool, use it for 5 minutes, and then commit tax evasion. This did help to differentiate it from the original DS lineup, though to be honest, most people were okay with the lower quality graphics on the DS. Nobody expects 4K on this. But regardless, it shows that Nintendo was kinda running out of ideas to make the handheld systems completely unique, and the major upgrades like a nice screen, 3D graphics, and OS, we already did that. The 3DS still sold well though. I mean, it beat the Xbox One, though I can't believe they shipped out 1 unit. There were some minor upgrades to increase the size of the screen with the 3DS XL, as well as hardware upgrades and quality of life changes with the new 3DS series, and then a 2D version of the 3DS. Just call it the DS2, you idiots! What an incredible lineup of systems though. I mean, for at least 20 years of experimentation, it feels like we finally reached the peak of handheld gaming. But then after the 3DS came out, Nintendo went crazy.
But in thinking about a new Nintendo system, we knew the prevailing thought would be this.
Okay.
The game will probably still be right for all of us.
Yeah.
But could it also be a perfect fit just for you?
Okay.
Welcome to the world of Wii U.
Oh my god, no, Nintendo! No! I can make an entire video about how much the Wii U was doomed from the start, but you and I both know you watch a little bit too much video game content, so I'll save you the time. You see, they kept experimenting, which is totally fine. It worked out last time, why wouldn't it work out now? But the problem is that people see this and this, and they think it's just a new accessory. The reason it sold so well is because non-gamers bought it. And it was such a cool concept too, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video videos to focus on how each console changed. The main difference between this and the Wii was the inclusion of the gamepad. The gamepad was an interesting idea, I'll give it that, but it did feel like experimentation for the sake of having something shiny and new to show off. Like, whoa, the Nintendo iPad, take my money. They thought, hey, the last one did so well, why won't this work? But they failed to understand why the Wii did so well, and it's important to remember this because it could shape the next console, as these are the most recent examples of what not to do in a console launch. So at this point, handhelds are losing steam thanks to Steve Jobs, and the Wii U failed commercially, teaching Nintendo a valuable lesson on how not to lose money. But this leads into the ultimate question that Nintendo would answer. What if we just... Oh my god, the Nintendo Switch. No longer did you need to buy a separate Nintendo handheld and a Nintendo console, now you had both in one. This was a genius idea, creating a handheld that's powerful enough to play console quality games and being able to play it both on the go and at home, the best of both worlds in one system. Now the only thing to mention is that there was a big sacrifice to make this happen. Yes, it can run console quality games, but certainly nowhere near the levels of its competitors at the time, and especially not today. And while Nintendo's first-party games generally run pretty well in the hardware, there are a few exceptions that feel very held back by the limitations of the system, and this is especially prevalent after 6 years. I mean, come on, it's basically an iPad from 2017. It's not gonna play Fortnite better than this. But Nintendo has released 2 revisions of the Switch. For one, the Nintendo Switch Lite, essentially a handheld-only version of the Switch with no ability to take the controllers off, a smaller build, and overall worse specs on the screen to provide longer battery life, but it was cheaper. Then on the opposite end, we have the Switch OLED. What a stupid name. So this model is not a hardware upgrade. Instead, it focuses on improving the build quality of the Switch itself, with an improved kickstand, a nicer looking dock, better body materials, and the most important upgrade of all, the screen. So the screen itself was improved from the previous model, now featuring an OLED panel in case you couldn't read, and it was also slightly bigger, taking up as much space as it could. Though there was no hardware upgrade to let it run games at better quality, which is a shame because it would have been a perfect idea to upgrade it at this point in time, especially because this was released in late 2021. 4 years after the Switch was released, and earlier in 2021, the Nintendo president even said that the console was in the, quote, middle of its lifespan, so there really couldn't have been a better time. But wait, if 2021 was considered the middle of the lifespan, then doesn't that make 2025 the end of the lifespan in 2 years? I mean, there have been plenty of rumors of a Switch Pro since as early as 2019, but everyone was thinking the Switch OLED would be that upgrade, and it wasn't. But with more and more insider reports, it's clear that Nintendo is showing signs of actually just leaving the Switch behind. So let's discuss. Nintendo has had a history of just upgrading the hardware, from the NES to the SNES, the Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance lineup, the DS to the 3DS, and then the new 3DS lineup. This makes it clear that Nintendo has never shied away from upgrading the internal hardware and selling it within the same generation. If anything, it was a great idea, especially with the Game Boy Advance. As well, the Switch is now the best-selling home console from Nintendo, so it's incredible that we haven't gotten a hardware upgrade yet. But if what the newest reports are saying turns out to be true, that they're thinking of moving on from the Switch in just 2 years or so, what else could Nintendo possibly do? Do we think they might try another Wii U situation and add a crazy accessory to the Switch while continuing the branding? I mean, it's probably a bad idea, but who knows? But if Nintendo doesn't go that route while still moving on from the Switch, what on earth are they gonna do? The handheld system's already peaked, and now that they've created a hybrid console, it seems like a really bad idea to backpedal and split the two again, since this concept clearly works and it's the most convenient for everyone. And if they decide to continue the idea of a hybrid because it's the best combination for Nintendo and it separates them from the competition, why would they need to move on from the Switch branding? If anything, they have no choice but to make another hybrid just like the Switch, and if the Switch did so well, why wouldn't you just upgrade it and make it last another couple of years? You wouldn't need to market and hype up an entirely new system because already people know what a Nintendo Switch is and they love it. It seems like a no-brainer to stick with the Switch. Personally, I still think we're gonna get a Switch Pro sometime soon, or at least a spiritual successor if nothing else, because I can't see them doing anything other than a hybrid going forward. It just makes sense. At the same time, if they want to be quirky and original and make something completely unique again, like the Wii and the 3DS and the Wii U, I just don't know what they could do. I feel like there's no more room to experiment, and another Switch is their only option. Oh my god, that's right! I have my insider information with my ultimate hacking skills. Let's see what it is. Oh my god, it's the new Wii U Switch XL.